Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
So, what do the Warriors do now? The Pelicans now face elimination, and the Bengals are more equipped to compete without Tee Higgins than the 49ers without Brandon Aiyuk. I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
Neil Young once wrote, "It's better to burn out than fade away." Well, the Warriors burned out last night. 94-118, the Sacramento Kings made the Golden State Warriors, the Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green Warriors look old and look slow. Cyrus Satsas, maybe half of those things. No, you're none of those things, Cyrus, from Locked On Warriors. He joins me now. Cyrus, what happened?
I think you nailed it. Old and slow. It's and it isn't this isn't something that just came out of nowhere. It's Klay Thompson's been struggling all season. When I say struggling, I mean by his standards. To me, the epitome of greatness in professional sports, and especially in the NBA, is consistency, doing it night after night, counting on that individual to come through regardless. And Klay Thompson is no longer that guy. Klay Thompson, to me, resembles more of the Ray Allen on the Miami Heat. That's where he is in his career. But this has been a long time coming. There's a reason why the Warriors were the 10 seed. There's a reason why they were in this position, playing on the road in a single elimination game. Interesting to note as well, this is the first time you mentioned Steph, Klay, and Dre. This is the first time that those three players, when healthy, have missed the playoffs. So it's a sign. It's a bad sign, and this is also indicative of bigger problems. This is the third time in three out of the last 5 years, the Warriors have now missed the playoffs. So you take that 2022 championship, but look, it was a championship. I mean, that's a big deal, but you take that out, and there's been a malaise for a while now with this team. And they got some big questions to answer this offseason.
Yeah, we'll have plenty of time to dig into those. But you mentioned Klay Thompson took the collar in this game. 0 for 10, 0 for 6 from 3. Andrew Wiggins, 4 of 11 in this game. And those were two players who were pretty essential, Wiggins especially, in their title run. But also, Cyrus, this was a team that in the second half relied on their young players when Steve Kerr would put them on the floor, right? This has been a bugaboo of yours for a long time. And then when you got to go down with the ship, Kevon Looney, who's a younger guy, not out there. What did you think of how this was all managed?
I thought it was managed very poorly. You bring up the young players. The Warriors got off to a slow start in this game, and since January 30th, and this was true until about a week ago, and it still might be true, but I just haven't looked the stat up since then, the Warriors had the second best record in the NBA behind just the Boston Celtics.
Wow.
And there were two players that were a reason for that. Draymond Green, he came back from suspension and reminded everyone he can play defense and orchestrate an offense, but
and stay on the court.
Yeah, exactly. And the other variable, though, was Trayce Jackson-Davis. Who over the last month and a half became a starting center for this team and was providing an incredible impact, leads the team in field goal percentage. He finally provided a shot blocker for this team. I mean, they haven't experienced rim protection since they traded James Wiseman away, and he never really played that much to begin with. So what Trayce Jackson-Davis brought was a whole new element that made life easier for everyone else. So what happens tonight? 5 minutes into the game, the Warriors go off to a slow start. Keegan Murray is on fire. And speaking of Wiggins and Klay, those are the two players who were failing in their assignment guarding Keegan Murray. But Trayce Jackson-Davis is pulled from the game 5 minutes in. We don't see him again until the fourth quarter when they're trailing 97-78. He plays 10 minutes total, and I thought that was indicative of a perfect example of just, the bigger issues with Steve Kerr and his lack of faith and trust in his young players.
Like I said, we will have plenty of time to dig into all that ails the Warriors and where they go from here. And of course, people should listen to Locked On Warriors if they want to get more of that over the coming days and weeks. But I was struck watching the end of this game and then listening to you on your post-game live, wondering if Steve Kerr is the right coach to usher this team into the next era of Warriors basketball.
I will say this to the very end that, and it's not a bold statement, he was clearly the right coach at the right time. You know, he had a foundation in place. People routinely underrate Mark Jackson and the job he did those 2 years he was there. Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson themselves will credit Mark Jackson to the end for changing the culture, for creating a defensive identity that this organization had not experienced for nearly 40 years. But Steve Kerr was clearly the right person, and they won 4 championships under his leadership. But at the same time, he's never proven that he can develop players. He's never developed an all-star player in his entire 10 plus years as a head coach. And he clearly has favoritism towards these veterans. The fact of the matter is we have never seen him do it with a roster that doesn't have Steph, Klay, and Dre, and now he's not doing it with them. So it's going to be interesting. He did just get that 2-year, $36 million extension. It is peculiar that it was only for 2 years. Most contract extensions are longer than that. I think that was indicative of ownership and the front office recognizing that even they're not 100% certain that Steve Kerr is the right guy for the long term, but he's going to be back next year. That's almost a certainty. But I'm very fascinated by what direction this team goes through next, because Steve Kerr in his post-game press conference in a 2+ minute speech did almost nothing but reminisce about the good old days and talk about all the glory the Warriors have achieved. And my intern on the program astutely pointed out that it was an Al Bundy reference to the 4 touchdowns in Pokai's championship game. It was very similar to that. And I'm very curious about this offseason.
Stay up to date all year on the Golden State Warriors by subscribing to Locked On Sports today and Locked On Warriors on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports today your first listen. Coming up, the New Orleans Pelicans are not backed into a corner. Before we get to that, the Bucks are preparing for playoff life without Giannis. Guys, I need you all to listen up for a huge announcement. I've been tracking the leaderboards every day, keeping an eye on the scores, putting all my heart into it, and I'm super pumped to announce I am finally on top. That's right. Obviously, I'm talking about the hit mobile game Monopoly Go. You've probably heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great mobile twist on the classic Monopoly. You can play anywhere, anytime. You explore hundreds of Monopoly boards from Las Vegas to Camelot to the moon, all while raking in a huge fortune. Charge rent on iconic properties just like classic Monopoly. You can charge your friends rent on your iconic properties or go after their Monopoly money by pulling bank heists and taking wrecking balls to their landmarks. But my favorite part is the leaderboards, where you can see who's Monopoly Tycoon and who has gone bankrupt. Go get yourself on the charts. Download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store and Google Play. It's Locked On's NFL Mock Draft live on April 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on April 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. Locked On NFL Mock Draft on April 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Streaming live on Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. The Milwaukee Bucks are preparing to be without 2-time MVP Giannis Antetokounmpo for the start of their Eastern Conference first-round series against the Indiana Pacers, but our hopeful treatment on his left calf strain will allow him to return sometime later in the series. Antetokounmpo has been undergoing around-the-clock treatment on the calf. Until we know if he's playing or not, we are going to prepare as if he's not playing, Bucks forward Chris Middleton said after practice on Tuesday. Kawhi Leonard took his first step toward playing in Game 1 of the first round against the Dallas Mavericks when he was a limited participant in the LA Clippers' first postseason practice on Tuesday. Leonard missed the final 8 games of the regular season with inflammation in his surgically repaired right knee. Coach Ty Lue would only say, "We'll see," in regards to whether Leonard will be ready for Game 1 on Sunday. Leonard has not played since March 31st against Charlotte. The The Lakers now move on to face the Nuggets. You know, just a rematch with the defending champs.
There's a lot that happened in Tuesday's game that is kind of relevant for what's coming next beyond, you know, Anthony Davis's health, beyond the way they play defense. So there's a lot going on in this game. And so plenty to get into. It was a fun game. Like, it was intense. It had the playoff intensity. It had, you know, chippiness. It was a nice little dress rehearsal for the Lakers moving forward. And
you mentioned just that it was a fun game. It was an exciting game. I tweeted out with a couple minutes left in the game, LeBron is clearly tired, and Anthony Davis clearly is not all the way back from this back injury. It is officially hold on to your butts time.
Yes.
I mean, like, this game got uncomfortable down the stretch, exciting, and the Lakers pulled it through.
The Lakers sure are comfortable in the play-in, but we got everything we could want. A star-studded affair as the Lakers hold off the Pelicans, 110-106. Zion Williamson goes for 40 and 11. A slew of highlight plays in this one, and the Pelicans lose at home in gut-wrenching fashion. Jake Madison from Locked On Pelicans joins me now. And Jake, this is a Pelicans team that over the course of the season, there were times when they looked like, hey, this could be one of the best teams in the conference. And there were times where they look like a play-in team. We saw both of those on Tuesday night.
Yeah, look, can I come in hot here on the show? With I think if Zion Williamson doesn't get injured late in this game and doesn't miss the final 3 minutes, the Pelicans win. I think that very strongly, because they played so well. They were down early in this game, down 18, and then they came back to take the lead and were in control with, as you said, Zion Williamson basically unstoppable with 40-11, 5 assists, just 3 turnovers in this game. And they still fought till the very end there. And they did this getting bad games from CJ McCollum, from Brandon Ingram, their 2 other stars. It's just an absolutely brutal loss for New Orleans, because they would have won if Zion had stayed in.
This is, in a lot of ways, an embodiment of the Pelicans' experience in the Zion Williamson era. So close to doing what we think they're capable of doing, and then an injury, especially a Zion Williamson injury, scuttles the whole deal.
Yeah, and it seems like this could be a serious injury. Like, this wasn't just like a knock and he was sitting on the bench. He had a layup and then immediately went to the locker room, had his head in a towel, slammed the towel on the ground, went to the locker room, didn't come back. This was the first time he's ever played in the postseason. The first kind of that type of game, arguably the biggest game of his career. For him to not come back out and finish out that game, we don't have an update yet. We heard that the Pelicans said they're going to do some imaging on it, but it's a lower leg injury, or a lower body injury. I guess lower leg is what that is. So it's an injury to one of his legs. And for him not to finish out a game where he was unstoppable, where he took over, that's not just a concern from this season, but something that could be a concern going into next year if he's not healthy to start. And if you look at kind of his trajectory this year, right? He started off the year kind of slow because he missed the majority of last season. You want this guy kind of fit in shape at the start of the year. Now that becomes in jeopardy for the Pelicans. This is like the type of injury that spans multiple seasons, it could feel like.
Yeah, and unfortunately, injuries have spanned multiple seasons, seemingly every year for Zion Williamson. I hate to harp on that, but this is someone we love watching when he looks like this, and his body has just betrayed him. You mentioned how close this game was with 1:58 left. It was a tie game, and the Pelicans fought right to the end. Now it's not over for the Pelicans as we record this. The Kings and the Warriors are going at it. What has to happen for the Pelicans to get in with a shot to, you know, try something?
Yeah, look, you know, they have another shot at it. For Pelicans fans, it might feel like the season's over, but it's not. There's a game on Friday that you are going to play with or without Zion Williamson. We'll get a couple of updates throughout the rest of the week on this, but you need better performances from Brandon Ingram, from CJ McCollum. CJ in this game was 4 of 15, 1 of 9 from 3, 9 points on 15 shots is terrible. Brandon Ingram was 4 of 12 for just 11 points. He's working his way back from an injury.
He's a playoff performer too.
We've seen him do it. We've seen him average over 30 at times against the Phoenix Suns in the postseason. You have to get them having big games. You know, Zion kind of did this and willed the team to that tie game despite some of his teammates, essentially. And you need to get good performances out of them. That's the only way that you're going to go forward with or without Zion Williamson, right? You can't rely on a 40-point 10 rebound, 5 assist game from Zion every night. The other star players for your team, the other core guys, need to step up. They didn't in this game. New Orleans might have been able to withstand the Zion injury because of how late it happened. Had those guys stepped up, but they had a bad game. They can't have a bad game either against the Kings or the Golden State Warriors on Friday, whoever it might be.
Stay up to date all year on the New Orleans Pelicans by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Pelicans on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, the Bengals are in a better position to compete without Tee Higgins than the 49ers without Brandon Aiyuk. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. The Philadelphia 76ers have the Miami Heat right where they want them, right? FanDuel has the Sixers 5-point favorites tonight. Of course, playoff Jimmy may have something to say about that one. What are you waiting for? Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The Bengals and 49ers seem to be in similar positions. Do you extend your wide receiver 2 or trade him? Is Brandon Aiyuk really a wide receiver 2? On a recent Peacock and Williamson, the Bengals are in a better position to compete if they have to trade their guy.
But the sellers still want to win the Super Bowl this year. You know, I mean, you're not trading Aiyuk for McConkey.
I think especially the 49ers
especially
are like, oh, we've lost 2 Super Bowls. We've lost NFC championship games. Yeah. We are all in right now to win a Super Bowl. We're not going to worry about a draft pick next year and the cap space in 2 years. We're trying to win. Like they're putting they put void years in 2028 on Yetur Gross-Matos' 2-year contract in free agency, right? Like just they're trying to win right now. They're not as worried about the future. The future will be the future. And if they win, then that makes everything a lot rosier in the future when they really start to have to make some tough choices. I think those tough choices for the Niners happen in 2025. For the Bengals, I think it's not as pressing immediately. And I think they're in a better opportunity to compete without Higgins than the 49ers would want.
18 or, you know, something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Or they take Thomas from LSU at 18 and then deal Higgins for the early second. You know, like that's how I kind of see that going down.
To me, this is easy. Jamar Chase is a lot better than Deebo Samuel, and Joe Burrow is a lot better than Brock Purdy. This isn't even a question. Brandon Aiyuk, this isn't even a question. Brandon Aiyuk is, I think, one of the 10 or 12 best receivers in the league. Tee Higgins, he's probably one of the 15 to 18, maybe top 20 receivers in the league. He's a really good player. He's not a 1. Brandon Aiyuk showed last year he's a bona fide 1. Meanwhile, the 49ers, they can kind of plug and play with some of these guys. It's still Kyle Shanahan, but it's also still Brock Purdy. We don't know what he looks like when he doesn't have the Avengers to save the day. We know Joe Burrow is an elite quarterback. Yes, he's had Jamar Chase and Tee Higgins, but we've seen the throws that he's capable of making, the way he can read and manipulate defenses. And he still has Jamar Chase. He still has his trump card. Aiyuk is the trump card. Okay, maybe Kyle Shanahan too. This is a no-brainer. And wouldn't it be a shame if the 49ers had to trade a star player? I guess the Packers are going to be the favorites in the NFC before you know it. And finally, women's basketball just keeps destroying records. The Caitlin Clark Experience delivered another television milestone as ESPN's coverage of the WNBA draft on Monday night averaged a record 2.45 million viewers. Viewership peaked at a little over 3 million. ESPN sent a release on Tuesday. Better get on the bandwagon now, guys, because there's going to be room. It's going to be a big wagon. We'll make sure it's a big wagon. And be sure to go check out all of our coverage of the WNBA draft from Monday night, Locked On Sports Today, and of course, Locked On Women's Basketball. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, will playoff Jimmy reemerge? So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on Sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.